Give a demo on CSS Subgrid. CSS Subgrid allows you to put a CSS grid inside another CSS grid and use the parent's grid lines. And just to clarify, you're always able to put a CSS grid inside another grid. It's just the using the parent's grid lines is the new feature with CSS Subgrid. So this landed in Chrome last year in September. Firefox and Safari were already supported. This is the Can I Use page for Subgrid. All of the major browsers, desktop browsers, are now supported, but not IE. So this is something I was excited about because I had a use case in our app in Umbrella to use this, and I had known about Subgrid, but I wasn't able to use it because it wasn't supported in Chrome yet. But when I found out it was supported, I was pretty excited. So I wanted to show you a demo of my use case. This is a simplified version of what we have in our app. It's an equipment grid, and let me show you the code also. So I used React and Next.js and CSS modules here. I initially didn't want to do that. I initially wanted to do it in vanilla HTML and CSS, but doing it this way was just easier for me because I work in this in my day-to-day, and this provides hot reloading, which I wanted, and it provided a way for me to get my data. And I'm getting the data for this page using this SQL query here. Don't pay too much attention to the details of this query. I had to ask AI and Google how to write this, and it's not correct, actually. It's wrong, but for the purposes of the demo, I think it suffices. And then just a side note on this. Normally we use GraphQL to get our data, but I did it this way. I just thought it was easier because I didn't have to bring a GraphQL library and didn't have to do some transformation, so it was less code. And then the second reason is just because I thought it was kind of cool. This is using the new React server components and Next.js app router, so it allows you to query a Postgres database or anything from within your React component and then use the data there, and you can intersperse them with client components. So we haven't had a chance to use this in our app yet, but I know Wataru has started migrating his stuff on the external side to this, so that's pretty cool. So this is the markup. And stop me if you have any questions. Let me know if you have any questions. This is the markup, and this is the div with the CSS, that's the CSS grid, and on the left side here, this is that class. It has the display grid set, and it has the column definition set here. And one of the things I wanted to do with this is make the header rows sticky. So I could do that by adding this position sticky and also adding top 0 here. And then now if I scroll this, you'll see that this gray headers stick to the top. But I also wanted to make this other header row sticky with the vehicle name. So I could add that to that as well. And you can see that now this one is sticky and this one is still sticky, but that's not what I want because these two overlap. So I could change this top position here to something like 60 pixels. And now that's closer to what I want. It's a little bit off here, and you can ignore this other cell here. I needed to add it there too, but I didn't do that. The problem is that you need to know the height of this row in order to set this position properly. And this is dynamic because the height of this is dynamic because it's based on the length of this vehicle name, and it could change. So this is something I had in my app, and what I did in my app which wasn't the greatest, is I swapped these two rows and I set a fixed height for this gray row, and then I set the top position of this one to equal the height of the gray row. And that meant I had to set some constants to some hard-code values, and it wasn't really what I wanted to do. And what I really wanted to do, if I can just show you, what I really wanted to do was add a div around this header and say, let's say we add a class name for this. We'll call it header rows. And then I'm gonna finish the div off here. So that div is around all those header cells. And I'll go ahead and add this class. And what I really wanted to do was add this position sticky here on these header rows, like that. And I'll go ahead and save this side. And the problem with this is that CSS Grid operates only on its direct children. And so since I added this extra div here, this whole div is being treated as the first grid cell. And if I open up the dev tools and turn on the grid lines, you can see that this here is that first grid cell, and all of this is in that first grid cell. So I'll turn off the dev tools. So we can make this better by setting grid column to start at the first grid line and end at the last grid line. So now this spans all of the columns, but the layout of inside here is not what I want. So I can set this to display grid, and I can copy these column definitions from this other grid and put it here as well. And that looks pretty good, but the column lines are not lined up if you look carefully. And you can see that if I change this to auto here, you can see that it's not lined up a little bit better. And if I inspect this with the dev tools, you can see there's these two grids, and if I turn on the grid lines, you can see that the grid lines are in different places for each of these grids. So let me undo that last change. So this problem is exactly what CSS Subgrid is for. So instead of setting these grid columns independently here, I can set grid template columns to be subgrid. And now this inner grid will use the grid lines of the parent grid. And you can see that this lines up properly, and if I inspect it, you can see this parent grid and this subgrid, and then the grid lines line up properly. And if I scroll, it still has the sticky header, and I apply the sticky positioning to that entire thing. And I can actually, I left these on here, but I don't need these anymore. I'm able to apply the sticky positioning to this whole thing. I don't have to worry about hard coding values. So I was very happy about that. And you can use Subgrid for rows as well as columns, or a combination of rows and columns. And that's the end of my demo.